This is Randy.
Hi, everybody.
And I'm David. And we both work with technology every day. It's not something that I thought I would be. Well, I worked with technology when I first started doing what I'm doing, but it's come to be electronic technology now more than the physical technology it was. And I think Randy works in a physical field that's been engulfed by the electronic technology as well.
Certainly. My name's Randy LeBlanc. Got a business called Metalhead Incorporated. It's an art and architectural metals business where I started after I graduated from UL in 2000. Immediately went into this studio-based metal business. I had no desire to be very industrial. I had creative and progressive thinking for the products that I wanted to do, but I wanted to make a living. And technology for me was very, very limited. Even at the time, UL was pushing certain aspects of technology. 12 years ago, I had a cell phone that looked like a brick and a fax machine, and that was about it. Basic welding technology, basic mechanics of a fabrication shop. So for the past 10 years, I've been building and growing this business, and technology has crept up into my business whether I liked it or not. And now I like it just fine. Absolutely couldn't live without it. The past 3 years have been incredible with how I've been able to integrate technology into the business of the art. It doesn't always necessarily have an effect on the piece directly, but by integrating technology into how I come about to finish these pieces, it gives me more time to work on the actual piece itself. So I've got a random group of finished products, and a few of them are process, how I go from, like Cody had touched on, there's really not much of a substitute for the analog. I really still enjoy the analog. I've gotten away from it at times and regretted it. And I go back to the analog, the hand-drawn piece for a design concept. It could be digitized and incorporated with as a sales tool, but I'll move on to a CAD drawing that's fairly close to what that analog drawing was. And I can even import that over to using digital photography, and most people know about this stuff, but for someone in the blacksmith or fabrication trade, that's big stuff for us guys. It really has slingshot my business into a more a modern approach and kept my industry alive.
And in our profession, we've had the technology now for a while, and what I see happening with it, and I've kind of like Randy, I've grown bit by bit with the technology in using it. At first, it was just a matter of 2D drawing, a way of 2D drawing that was a lot cleaner than using graphite and having to work with vellum and the humidity and that kind of thing. But then 3D applications started coming out, and of course the software and the hardware is always a little out of reach for a small firm, so we were always a little behind the edge, but the edge keeps getting closer and closer, I find. And we too work with sketching a lot. I like the imprecision of sketching. It allows for more imagination, I think, and we even work back and forth, like you're talking about. The sketching now starts to happen digitally. I'll start working with a cube sometimes in a program called SketchUp in 3 dimensions, and there's imprecision in that happens, that even though it looks precise, it's not. That allows you to see things between lines and where things don't quite join sometimes. That end up generating something that you get precise with. But the precision, I think, is what I see influencing the profession now, and it's influencing the way that architects and contractors and owners work together. And there's something out there called building information modeling that is done almost exclusively in 3 dimensions, and the project is designed while it's calculated or estimated, and then it's actually being built while it's being designed. And it relies a lot on precision and not much on hand sketching. And it's redefining really how we work with contractors. So we're having to be more creative and learn more technology to be a step ahead of the contractors, really.
When you had indicated when we were talking earlier that isn't necessarily a universally good thing to have that more robust dialogue.
No, I don't think so. In thinking about all this, I think of the precision of Mies van der Rohe and imprecision of Antonio Gaudi, and their works were so organic on the one hand, and one was so precise on the other. And there's beauty in both, but there's less and less of the imprecise beauty, the softer beauty that I see.
David, I find that the more I've pushed to use technology in my business by the various tools of networking, social networking, business promotion, the smartphone is my little Swiss Army knife for a fabricator. You could probably never give a better tool to a metal guy than a hammer or an anvil than a smartphone. I've watched these old timers walking around just like how they say like that with their head down. And most of them are bald like me with beards, so that kind of hides and they have to look past it. But I find myself as I approach technology wanting to go back even as far extreme analog to going to the real traditional roots. And the technology has actually given me a little more time to do it. It's opened up. When I become efficient in one aspect of my business, I'm able to develop something else. So it may not have a direct effect on what I'm doing as the product or as the craft, as the art, the sculpture. But as the business as a whole, the whole entity in the process, I've found that that's helped me out a little bit. I've probably done more hand drawing in the past 2 years than I have in the past 5 prior to that.
Yeah, the technology really is a good business tool. It's really taken the not the drudgery out of business, but it's allowed me to learn more business a lot more quickly than I would have just waiting for problems to come along and slapping me upside the head.
It's like pulling the Band-Aid off faster.
Yeah. It is like that. And it does free me up to actually do some drawing sometime. I'd gotten to a point where I was doing all business and not drawing anymore. But the technology now does allow me to do some drawing. What I'm particularly good at is specifications. And part of our job is we have a written component to the projects that we turn out. We have drawings, but there's also a manual, sometimes a couple of inches thick, that specifies particular materials and procedures and this and that. And that was my first introduction to the technology back in the early 80s, late 70s, with a Radio Shack computer with 512K RAM. And we would.
You still have it?
No, that's a boat anchor now. But what a process of turning out specifications took about 3 weeks, and a lot of typing and proofreading and whiteout and just saying, oh, that's close enough, it'll do. It turned the process into a 3-day process where you could get really specific and enjoy doing it, and not having to use whiteout and an old set of specs and start retyping, rereading, proofreading, retyping. So that aspect really changed quickly. That was the first aspect to change for us.
I think we share some common ground in, granted I'm a subcontractor, but most of the product that I do is ornamental, and majority of it's two-dimensional. So I haven't had the need per se to explore the three-dimensional realm on my architectural product side. As an architect, I know you certainly have to work. Your product is not two-dimensional. You're working two-dimensionally, and your product is three-dimensional. Where do you see that, and how is it? What do you think it's going to grow into?
Well, for me, one of my things I try to do now is to build a building without a butt. You look at buildings, and every building has a backside. And there's really no reason for a building to have a backside if you think about it and look at it as something out in the landscape and think about how it joins with the landscape. So that's one thing that that's helped me become a better architect. And, I'm not a great one by any means, but I've gotten more attuned to design as I've gotten older and found devices to help me set a building in the landscape that doesn't look like it, it still shows off a face, but then it has an ear, and a little trim in the back. But it doesn't have, a lot of IBs and stuff hanging off the back now.
You realize I'm going to use that on a job site and get in trouble for calling somebody's house and having a butt.
I'd be curious, how much for you guys, given that you guys are working in physical things, right, in terms of what you're creating, how much is technology inspiring the creativity versus helping you communicate the creativity that's happening? Technology is kind of a way for you to help other people see your vision versus it's actually the tools that help you create the vision in the first place.
Well, yeah, on my part, I can speak to that. In the old days when we did everything on a drafting board, we'd do preliminary drawings, hand drawings, and then we'd do a really fine ink drawing to sell a client on our solution to their problem, which is what we called it back then. And we would do anything. I mean, we had to be a great salesman not to come back and have to change a bunch of things because it took a lot of time and labor to make that pretty drawing. Now, we'll do 10, 15 iterations of a building just for ourselves before we even get to a client, and then we'll show a client 2 or 3, and we'll show it to them in 3D and spin it around and let them make changes. Some changes we can make on the fly. Some it takes a little more work, but we're less scared of change now. And I think that's been one real big difference. I think you get better quality design by not being afraid to make more changes during design.
And Randy, I think you had some remarks on the significance of going online and being able to have that as a vehicle to help make people aware of your work. Has it been successful for you?
Oh, absolutely. Social networking, I avoided like the plague until I realized I was missing a tool in my business. Once again, a time saver. I didn't have the energy and the time and the resources to market myself. I could barely keep up. But simply having a camera at my ready at the end of a job, a snap of a photo, post it up, and it's exposed to my immediate front and then the network beyond. I've gotten a very trackable, documented number of results and increased business from just that marketing tool. I mean, I never would have thought that I would get something at that speed and that turnaround. Mm-hmm. What was the other part of your question?
Well, that was
That was it. Yeah, well, I had a thought based on what I use technology to produce the designs, and there's technology out there that actually can replicate some of the ornamental work that I do, but it is essentially a very labor-intense piece. This gate was completely hand-forged. There's nothing in there that was done by any machine other than the guy sitting up here as one of my employees, Chris LeBeau. And it as much as I've got technology that sold it, produced it on paper, and we went back and forth with the customer on the design, it was still had to be done by hand. And some people argue that there's cutting systems that can cut that out. You lose a certain human element when you completely automate. So I really had connected with what Cody was saying. You start. There's an appropriate time and place for technology, and for me, majority of it's in the business side of what I do, but from that directly affects the actual product that I produce. It has made my product grow. It's held my product accountable. It's an honest view of what it is.
Your machinery changed over the years because of the technology, electronic technology?
A little bit. I mean, I've had the average run of equipment, but like I said before, I've started buying up blacksmith tools and going in the opposite direction as opposed to buying the latest and greatest laser or water jet. Those things don't have an interest to me.
Right.
It's going back to the roots. So I mean, I started in the middle, went right, back left, and hopefully we end up in the middle again.
Yeah.
I think part of what's neat about this is we're seeing how Technology is not just for technology people. Technology has the potential to affect creative professionals, no matter how analog, your creative profession may actually be. There's still opportunities for technology to come in and play a vital role.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's, I know a few architects that still draft by hand and haven't really jumped into the electronic technology, but I think they're missing out on something fun and an adventure, really. It becomes more of an adventure the more I go along into it anyway. It's,
do we have any questions from the audience for our speakers?
So, Randy, can you talk a little bit about how you went to the water jet company and convinced them that they could go from industrial production to something that was really a one-time need for an architectural product?
Okay. What Jackie's bringing up is a project I'm working on for UL dorms, and they had a lovely architect from out of state I was working with, and which technology allowed me to work and interact with these guys. But they were details. That you want to talk about not changing a note? I couldn't change a thing on these gates, and had to just stick to the boundaries. But for somehow, I was able to convince the architects to let me water jet cut some particular parts on a gate that would have been not very well made as hand. That's when the technology actually surpassed what could have been done by hand. Now, I didn't insist we do the entire job that way. I just wanted to incorporate certain parts that would make it more efficient, cost effective, and repeatable, because we had a certain number of them to do. So I approached the water jet company, and they usually have an interest in doing something creative, but they know there's not enough volume out there to most of the these water. If you're not familiar with a water jet or a laser or a plasma, they're a two-dimensional CNC-driven machine that automatically cuts out. It's kind of like you would be a printer, but an industrial application. And typically used in oil field around here, and there's several of them. But I've approached a few of them about doing specific parts for me at times. And it worked out. It was a combination of hand-forged work that was married to cut materials that are, cutting edge, that work together in a process. So neither one of them won out. They worked together, and I was able to have that compromise in a product that was very successful. The architect loved it and was okay with the whole deal. And it was a good example of using both sides of for traditional and cutting edge.
Terrific.